Welcome to the next episode of the Existential Files. Hello, Louie.
Hello, Matthew.
How is it down there in the abyss?
You're
staring over the abyss, aren't you? Really?
It's a very sunny day today. Actually, I'm boiling hot in my conservatory.
Conservatory, very middle class.
Roasting, which is nice. It's a nice spring day.
So it's nice and warm in the abyss.
Last time we started off talking about positive psychology.
Mm.
And I think we ended on the note of, certainly one of the questions we discuss, or I like to talk about, is life itself worth living?
Well, exactly, because I think part of the discussion about positive psychology, I may have said, one of the definitions, one of the ways in which it's conceptualized, it's about using psychology or the ideas within it, or the scientific study of that which makes life worth living. And maybe some of the applied work of it is about saying, okay, well, how can we use these ideas to help our lives even more fulfilling, more flourishing, and so on? And I think you were sort of saying, that kind of starts with the assumption, or it begs the question of, is life worth living? And that, to me, of course, is one of those big existential questions. Is that right?
Well, I mean, I think, the way I come at it from it is I think it's Heidegger who says, there's a thrownness to existence. We find ourselves existing. We don't sign up, put our name in a raffle and say, might be up for doing that, thanks very much. We each of us find ourselves existing. And I think that, this question, is life worth living? I mean, is it an existential? Because, Camus said that the one philosophical question is, do we commit suicide? Which is kind of, do we reject existence? Do we say, fuck you, existence, stick it up your ass, I've had enough of this? And I think somewhat it's I was reading a book the other day, and I was looking for a guest that has written a book on the brain being a kludge. And his hypothesis, his suggestion is that, evolution isn't about producing the best. So the human eye is not the best eye that could exist. The human brain, the human mind is not the best mind that could exist. It's good enough. And I think, I was talking about this, yesterday, and saying, positive psychology, is it good enough psychology? Is that what you're looking for? Good enough psychology, or are you looking for something else? Because good enough psychology, maybe, okay, that's fair enough, whatever. I don't know.
Goodness me, that was a bit of a mishmash of ideas, Louie. I shall pull out what I can, which is the good enough bit. Which makes me think of a song by, I can't remember the band now. If it's good enough for you, it's good enough for me. Who sang that? Is it called Juicy or something like that? We're talking about the 90s.
Dodgy.
Dodgy, Juicy, Dodgy. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So it's that
Juicy,
one.
Dodgy. Yeah.
Juicy, Dodgy. Juicy is a better name. So good enough, and it makes me think of our good friend Professor Martin Seligman, because there is a very useful positive psychology TED talk. So again, you find a lot of people in positive psychology have been asked to do TED talks, and one that is actually a very good introduction to positive psychology from Seligman's perspective is one I think it's probably called "What is Positive Psychology?" And he tells a story that talks about whether or not psychology is good enough. And without giving away his kind of his introductory joke, is a little bit his idea of whether or not psychology is good enough at the moment, kind of the progress. So there's something about that. Maybe he's trying to bring some element of psychology to make it, in quotes, better. But I want to go back to this idea of, when we've discussed this idea of psychology being used in an applied way to explore either how one makes one life even more worth living, let's say, or even just this idea. Definitely there's been somewhere in the writings that say, well, you could think of it as psychology applied to those aspects of life which make life worth living. So things like happiness, well-being, love, positive emotion, or emotion in general, what it means to explore one's own strengths and what we mean by strengths in terms of personality theory, and so on and so on. That's where some of that language is. And I felt as though, at least in part of our previous conversation about positive psychology, because you are quite suspicious, skeptical about it as a quotes movement, is there something it's kind of starting from a base of saying, well, it begs the question of whether or not yeah, we're all thrown into this existence. We all are faced with this. Again, one of my quotes I like to go back to is Basil Fawlty is, beats me, we're stuck with it, I suppose. Given we're stuck with it, what do we do with that? Do we just endure life and just stick out as long as we can and get by? Or do we at least take the experience, take the life that is thrown at us, and create something of interest, of worth, of value, at least for the individual experiencing it? I broke up just when I was saying something really profound, no doubt. Where did you lose me? Which massively fantastic piece of profoundness did you lose me?
That's fine. I mean, I think. I mean, for me, I keep coming back to people having opinions about worldviews. You know, for example, you know, Viktor Frankl in a concentration camp, and he's like, "Oh, this is a great opportunity for, you know, for finding a purpose in life, finding meaning or whatever," right? And a lot, you know, and there are other Holocaust survivors who said, "Fuck off, Frankl. What? This is a fucking Nazi concentration camp. It's not a fucking holiday camp for existential, you know, awareness." And you know, one of the things I just get a little bit, and I am suspicious of it, is the idea that if you don't sign up on the dotted line to your kind of Dianetics, you know, this is what we're doing it for the good of the species, you know, that you somehow that you're not pulling with the team or whatever. But you know, the fact of the matter is that I think it's a perfectly legitimate response to existence to feel that, you know, life isn't worth living. It doesn't mean then that you maybe are going to just sit in bed, or you're going to kill yourself, or that you can't have fun. I just don't like that you know, the thought that that you have to think life is worth living, you know, to be on your team or whatever. Because from my perspective, you know, I think, and we'll talk about this, hoping to get guests on who maybe talk about Viktor Frankl and concentration camps, you know, and other people's, you know, I think it's a perfectly legitimate, if you find yourself in a concentration camp, I think it's you're perfectly entitled to fucking hate every second of it.
So something about what you're entitled to do, absolutely, this entitlement. To what extent are we entitled to have certain feelings about our own existence? And the other really, really important word in this is this idea of worth. And it's actually a question that I often, you know, explore myself in the context of my own individual life experience, is what's worth doing? What is worth doing today? Even today, I have broken away from the task I have set myself today, which is recording and editing materials for a course, which I find quite laborious. It takes a long time to produce a piece of material which is about 10 minutes long. It can take me a day or two to actually record stuff and edit it in a way where I think I'm happy with that. So I find it quite hard work. So I go, actually, Louie, let's do a podcast, because I find that far more stimulating, interesting, fun, and so on, than that other piece of work. So I'm always questioning what's worth doing. And taking that to the bigger question, if we actually, okay, we're thrown into life, if we then choose to not end it, there must be some level of us thinking, well, it's worth carrying on with, in the possibility it may get better, or that there is some point to actually having this experience of waking up each day.
No, I mean, I disagree. I don't think, I think that you can be, and we've talked before about Clarence Darrow, you know, and who was a lawyer and very successful, famous, pessimist, intellectual, you know, and he argued life was not worth living. And it wasn't that he was suicidal, it's not that he didn't love his friends, but that he sees, and you know, I talked about concentration camp, and in some ways, the absurd universe existence is a kind of a concentration camp. And that's not to you know, it's not to make it diminish the Holocaust, you know, it's just to say that, you know, that what, you know, universe existence can be just as horrible, painful, miserable, you know, and the fact of the matter is that, you know, I love you, Matt, and you know, and I love talking to you, and I want only good things to happen to you. I want you to be happy, and I want you to be successful, and I want you to be at peace. And the fact of the matter is that I think we strive, you know, I strive. I mean, one of the other examples, just to carry on waffling, is, you know, cancer sufferers. If you get diagnosed with cancer, I kind of hate the way that everyone says, oh, he's battling cancer. because I think that puts on people who don't survive or that aren't winning the battle, that puts an onus on them that they're doing something wrong. Do you know what I mean? And I just think that rather than make a judgment and say, well, if you don't feel that life is worth living, then maybe, you know, you're doing something wrong. You know, if you want to feel that your life is purposeful, if you want to feel that life is worth living, I don't have a problem with that. But don't make it a requirement, you know, to be a human being, or don't make it a requirement that you must have that value judgment, because I don't think it's, I mean, I certainly don't believe that life is anything more from its base upwards, you know, randomness, meaninglessness, absurdity. And I think that, you know, you make the best of it, because what else can you do? I can't make a new universe. I can't extract human being from my brain and inject Louie being into my brain. You know, the fact
what would Louie being look like? What's Louie being?
It would have lots of big boobies. But the fact of the matter is, you know, I just think
about your person, you would have several breasts.
I would have
your own physical body.
That three-breasted thing
what a lovely
Total Recall. And I just think, you know, I'm still suspicious, and we're going to talk about positive psychology in a coming episode. So this is kind of why we're recording this one. And you know, I'm still suspicious.
We must also say, I think you've said before, so we mentioned before Clarence Darrow, and I'm not quite sure, and someone will remind us, if it was on a recorded podcast, because I didn't refer to, there was a couple, last week we recorded a couple, or underwent a couple of what I thought were really good emotive podcasts between you and I, to discover that afterwards they didn't record. So it could be some of that conversation was in one of those conversations where we were looking at this idea of, to what extent, you know, is it appropriate to start from the assumption that life's worth living? And you were bringing up Clarence Darrow to say, well, actually, he's someone who's argued that it isn't. You know, I think he was a lawyer, so I'm just going to quick look to sort of get my sense of who he is, and I'll read more about that afterwards. So we may come back to him. So it does start with this idea that life maybe potentially is worth living. But even this idea of saying, well, absolutely, you could argue that people are entitled to live their life as they choose. Yeah. You know, and then you get questions of, you know, morals and law and so on, and how they work within those range. But still, and even if you can agree to say absolutely entitled to that, and at the same time, people are entitled then to spend what blink of an eye they have on this planet available to them to actually make the experience as enjoyable, as meaningful as possible, even if it's just, well, all you're really doing is passing time. There's nothing else to it. But like you say, if you can do it in a way which you are, either being pleasant to other people, having pleasurable experiences, doing something that's meaningful, to choose a phrase you just used, being at peace, then absolutely, then that's a so-called worthwhile endeavor within the context of a human being's experience.
Sure.
Would you at least agree with that then? Even if not saying, you know, it's a kind of attempt to get everybody on side, everybody must think like this. That's where you start thinking as though it's like a cult-like type thing, where saying, no, you must do it this way. I don't think that's really central to it. It's recognizing that, well, even as an endeavor within psychology, we can use some of these ideas and methods and approaches to explore those elements of human experience which traditionally haven't been explored as much as they might, at least by psychologists.
And again, well, we're going to explore positive psychology more. We're going to have guests on that we can discuss it with, and, you know, pro and contra, and see. And I'm learning about it because, as you don't, you know, you didn't know about Clarence Darrow. I don't know about positive psychology. You know, it's not something that I've looked at. It's not something that I've ever, you know, considered. And so I'm learning this new. And, you know, again, I've got this initial skepticism, concern. Is it Dianetics? Is it Scientology? Is it, you know, transhumanism, psychological transhumanism? Is it science? You know, and is it shitting on people for not, you know, for not wanting there to be, you know, who don't think there's a meaning to life? You know, if you don't think there's a meaning to life, are you then, you know, are you not allowed to live? You know, or do you have nothing to offer? Because, you know, and I'm skeptical, but I'm willing to investigate it and listen to the arguments and see where we go with it.
Indeed. So we'll pause on that one now. So no, you need to be elsewhere to go and live your life with meaning and purpose. And we'll pick up some of these. Well, absolutely. But we'll pick up some of these topics either in the next episode or at least in some of the ones coming down the line at you. So thanks, Louie. Appreciated.
No problem.
Catch
Bye-bye.
you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.